brought George's picture from 2004, which one of these days I'm going to get framed, but I didn't get around to it before this morning. This was taken in 2004, July of 2004, so it's almost 20 years old. You can tell because I'm right over here. Okay, I'm in that circle. This is the back of Diana Gibson, who was our interim after Jim Burklow left. What I love about this picture is how it embodies what church is. There are 30 people in this circle, and there's some folks missing. The Wortmans, the Garrisons, the Hosseys, and the Van Dykes were all members then, and they're not in this picture. One suspects it was taken during a Hawaii trip where they all used to go en masse, you know, and chill out over there in Kailua. So, but of the 30 people who are in the circle, pretty close to half have died. And another quarter of them have either moved away to join their grandchildren, you know, wherever, or have simply moved away from this community by choice. And the other quarter is still here. So that's only 20 years. I mean, at our age, 20 years is, you know, that goes by in a heartbeat. The point of bringing up the picture is just to demonstrate that church changes a little bit at a time with every departure and every addition, and yet it is still recognizably College Heights community doing its thing, and it still is, and that's the point of the picture. People have left us. These are the folks in this picture are the ones we sing about in the litany. You know, here's Bruce and Alice Bishop, Lois and Jerry Brock, right? Jan and David Lamphere, they're all in this picture. We remind ourselves of the people we have lost once a year, like this, all together. And we thank them that they have been part of this circle. And if we're lucky, when we're gone, somebody's going to rewrite the last verse of the litany and we'll be in it. So that's the point. That's how church works. It's a wonderful thing that continues through the generations of the people who have been part of it and active in it. And this is where we are today. So who else would like to come and talk?
I'm here with my uncle over here, my uncle Federico. This is my grandmother, her close-up with him in the Mark of Zorro with Tyrone Power. But most of all, my friend died a couple months ago, Walt Curtis. He was the self-proclaimed poet laureate of the Northwest of Portland, Oregon, and the greater Northwest. And if you look on Google and look up Curtis, C-U-R with an S at the end, Walt Curtis, you'll find about 50 sites on him. The very next day after he died, there was already an obituary for him. He was sort of famous, and I'm still mourning his passing. 1 week from today, Sunday, is his memorial, and I'm on the list to speak, and I'm going to sing him the song Freight Train. So allow me just a little bit of practice it. Freight train, going so fast. Freight train, going so fast. Please don't miss the train I'm on. They won't know which route I'm bound. When I'm dead, Lord, bury me deep, way down on old Chestnut Street, so I can hear old number 9 as she comes a-rolling by. When I'm dead and in my grave, no more good times here I crave. Just lay the stones at my head and feet and tell them that I've gone to sleep. Freight train, going so fast. freight train, going so fast. Please don't miss the train I'm on. They won't know which route I'm bound.
I don't think I ever talked about Karen, but if I did and you've already heard it, would you just tell me and I'll stop? I can't remember, I'm not very good at remembering sermons either, even when I speak, so there you go. Okay, so this is my younger sister, Karen, who died in August 2020. And she always, I would like to say, she always, almost always, had a harder life than I did. You know, starting when she was like 9, I'm going to say 9, I think it was 9, she had kidney disease, which progressively got worse until she had to be on dialysis. And she went through a couple of transplants that didn't take, and then she had a transplant from me, which did take for me. It worked for many years, so that was a good thing. I was healthy, she was healthy in many ways. In some ways she wasn't, because mentally she hardly ever was. I think it was hard for her. I don't know, some people can take illness and go on just well, and others, it doesn't seem to work that way for. Anyway, so at the end, her transplanted kidney from me also failed, and she was on dialysis for a number of years, longer than most people manage, I have to say. Anyway, just when I think about her, I think about, well, you know, I have such a lucky, fortunate life, and I'm all good things around me, right? And, you know, she didn't. I mean, who knows why? I don't know, but at least I feel bad. I do feel sad for her, and she didn't get to have a family either. She didn't have a husband or children or any other kind of family, really. So why did you want to know all this? Oh, I don't know why you did. You probably didn't, but I just thought this was the time. So this is Karen, and I hope she's happy wherever she is, if she's somewhere, right? I don't know.
But it's nice to have a picture. We said prayers for her for so many years.
That's true.
That's true. She lost.
Hi, I often bring my mother up. I forgot my mom today. With her cats and her gardens and so forth. But somebody was nice enough to give me my grandmother in the hymnal, and you might want to look and see if it's anybody you know. William Walter Hollister. So she was a teacher all her life in a small town, and always taught first and second grade. And along about February, April, she became very concerned about the kids that were not reading yet. So years later, when she was gone, my aunt, whose married name was also Hollister, was having lunch with a couple of older teachers. And they said, you know, there used to be a Lillian Hollister over in Roxbury. What's happened to her? And Jerry said, oh, she's my mother-in-law. Oh, she's gone now. And the older teacher said, you could take a rock and roll it into a log and roll it into Lillian's classroom, and it would come out reading in June. Yeah, somebody worked with her.
We used to tell stories like that about Lois Brock. I think she must have taught about half of San Mateo how to read, because that was her grade also.
This is on the left here is my dad, and don't we look alike?
Yes.
Okay. And he had a friend when he was growing up, the same town, and they became friends throughout their lives. And you can see, well, you already saw it. What do I have to say about Howard Hong, who is the theologian, the professor at St. Olaf College in Minnesota, the traveler, the book translator, all kinds of things that he did, and they remained good friends throughout their lives. The one thing I remember about Howard Hong is he came to our house one time and we were eating breakfast and he showed us how to crack an egg and eat it. I have used that knowledge for my whole life. It doesn't always work. Sometimes I get it in the middle and sometimes I get it in the end where I want it so that I can take a little spoon and, eat the soft egg inside. So if you have any more suggestions, let me know.
This is after you cook the egg?
Yeah, I do soft boiled.
Sounds much more appealing.
Okay. Well, if I need to put it up there, no.
We're interesting, huh?
My brother and I went to Vermont and went to a library, and then we got this in Waseca, Minnesota. Yeah, we also went to Vermont to see, our ancestors, and this is like from the 1600s, and this is a Zuba who had 17 kids and kind of populated the whole system. And then it goes down, through all these other people that are related. I think this was a great-great-grandfather. And then not on here is my grandfather, who was really good at the stock market. And he made a killing in the stock market. And he told my dad, how much wealth he had. And then 1929 came along, and he was left with just debt. And that's kind of been influential on me. You can have wealth and then you end up with debt. But a guy named Harold Uranus Cropsey pulled everything together, and we have a big book about all these people and biographies and things of them, and there's it's too bad there's just nothing really spectacular in any of it. But at least I've got all these pictures.
The world is mostly made up of people who are not salt of the earth.
Well, I brought my mom today. My mom was an interesting person. She grew up in a family whose father was an alcoholic, and her mother, I'm not sure about my grandmother, what she was. She didn't believe in Christmas. They never celebrated Christmas. They never celebrated birthdays. When my mother was 9, they divorced. So my mother, I think, grew up with my grandmother. I'm a little bit unclear about that. But my mother, when I was a kid growing up, she was very angry a lot. She was very impatient, very angry, but she was also very kind-hearted. So there was a lot of, I'm not sure. I was never sure which one I was going to get. But one of the things I remember that I loved is that she read to us every night. We would climb up on this green wicker couch, and she would read. She read Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, Heidi, Lassie Come Home, just all these wonderful books. And that's one of the things that I always look forward to every night, was another chapter in a book. As my mother got older, she mellowed. And everybody loved her. She was a church lady. She was everything in the church. She did everything. And I can remember finally when she was dying, I went back and I spent a week with her. And it was the best time I spent with my mother. I just sat by her bedside and we talked about memories, about just everything. On one point she said, "Aren't you bored just sitting there?" And I said, "No, not at all." And I think I was the most present with my mom at that time. And it was just a remarkable time that I spent with her. So my mother, by the way, her name was Nelda Elizabeth. Nelda. I forgot her name.
I'm really interested in this one. Oh, okay.
On the front, huh?
George Conklin. No, yeah, no, you're good. Sorry. There was a pause.
I'm going to show you this one, and then I'll show you an etching my sister gave me of my grandparents, my mom's parents. And if you look at this is my grandparents, grandmommy and granddaddy in Texas, and just notice how much taller he is than she is. That's how I read this story. So these are the two etchings I have. They're down here, they're so big. I could put them up here. This is my grandmother, we call her grandmommy, and this is, where did I put it? This is my grandfather. So let me just put these over here because they're big. We would go down there, probably went about 4 or 5 times down there, and then they would come out here. They lived in Austin, Texas, and he taught Shakespeare for 51 years and was in who's who. He was very serious, tall. She was short and plump. And actually, we have a picture of when he was her teacher. So he's this tall guy here, and then she has her things around here, you know. And somehow they got together and got married. So usually now you wouldn't see a teacher marrying one of their students.
Not during school.
Right, so it had come, this is North Carolina, in probably Spartanburg. What I was thinking of is how great my father was with his mother-in-law. When we went down on the train and I was a child, really, probably a toddler or an infant, what happens? There I am needing help. My mother and my sister get sick on the train. So we had to take care of all of them. And she once came to Dad and said, "Jimmy, you aren't playing any games on me. Why aren't you short-sheeting beds or any of those things?" Well, he said, "My older daughter, Judy, she's starting to do all that stuff. I have to be a good example so she won't do it." But she kept doing, you know, she did. And when Granddaddy got off the bus, he was diabetic and he died so much before her. We weren't expecting that. So when they put her in a senior's house, she came to Dad and said, Jimmy, can I have anything I want for dinner? And he was thinking, I have to let her have what she wants. So she had a very good dinner. Tea, clam chowder with French bread, onions, and, well, you know, fried onions type of thing, and ice cream. So we enjoyed it. They would come out here, we would go back there. And they were just wonderful relatives to have.
You want to share your gun?
Just hearing about the grandparent, I completely forgot about today. But I realized I don't have a picture of my grandfather on my mother's side, but I don't think his name has ever been lifted up in public before. Not that he has something to hide, but my middle name is Hallett, which is my mother's maiden name, which is his name, George Hallett. And he was born in Ohio, came to California when he was a kid, so that's about 1890. Wow. And moved to San Fernando Valley when that was farms, ranches, you know. And I'll just tell you a few things about him. He has a low need for achievement. He liked farming and ranching. He was homesteading, really. But he was an assistant postmaster during when they had the San Francisco earthquake, 1906. And he tells me that people they had nothing, you know, their homes were burned. So they were asking for money, and they would take off the sole of their shoe and say, send money. And the post office processed all of those things. There was one letter that was addressed to TKO4. And they wondered about that, and there was a boxer who had a technical knockout in the 4th round. I'll bet it's him, and it was. I guess they couldn't remember his name or something. But he was just such an adventuresome person. He got married, and in Balboa Island, which I imagine there wasn't a lot on Balboa Island at that time, but his idea of a honeymoon was, at that time there was an exposition in San Diego, and he says, I know, let's walk to San Diego. And that was their honeymoon. They walked along the coast, I think mostly on railroad right-of-way. There was a train. I don't think there was Highway 1 exactly. And he wrote a write-up about it, which Jim has read. And it was just such a romantic thing to do. Well, what my mother remembers on their vacations was they would all get into the car and drive out toward the Mojave Desert, and he'd see a dirt road. Well, that's an interesting road. I wonder where that road goes. And he would just drive out on this dirt road. And then he'd see another road, and they'd drive out on that road, and they would go camping. Camping involved canvas tents, sleeping bags that weighed like 30 pounds, big cast iron bowls. It was not so romantic for my mother or her mother, but that was the kind of person that he was. I remembered him just because out of all my relatives, of which I don't have a lot really, but they would all come and, oh, there's Roy. Oh, you're just great. Here's $1. Go away, you know. But he would sit down and tell stories. He would play. He worked in a post office, so he would snip all of these stamps that were canceled, and he had this big stamp collection, and then he showed me how to collect stamps. And anyway, he related, and he was just so full of life. The world was a magical place for him, and it was meant to be explored. And he lived in this old house. I mean, I think that house was in 1880. It was just stone and mortar kind of piled up as something you'd find out in the desert. But he had goats and he had sheep and he was raising corn and loving every minute of it. He had so much enthusiasm. He's just so dear to my heart.
This is my mother and father. And my father died when I was about 4, maybe not right around that age. But they lived in Texas, and he had been elected county clerk of Bell County. And the county clerk is the one that signed your marriage certificate and your death certificate, those sorts of things. My mom later married my stepdad, who was in the Army, and we moved around. We were in Kentucky, we were in Texas. And then we went to Japan.
There's no cookies in there.
Oh, wow. So we lived in Japan for 2.5 years. We were at an Air Force base and Itazuki on Kyushu. And so we had some adventures, but what was interesting is being in the military, you would meet families where my father had signed their marriage certificate. Those were kind of fun because it's Fort Hood, Texas I think is the military base close to there. So there'd be quite a few marriages and things like that. So it was kind of sweet to have your father's signature on all those documents. That's about all they did in those days, was sign papers.
My mom and dad, probably shortly before they were married. And I often have wondered whether my dad's father, whom I never knew, told his son about the birds and the bees, the how, and also the when, because I was born on my dad's birthday, August 5th. And I guess over the decades, it saved my mother. She only had to bake one birthday cake a year.
This is my Ray, my son, and I had to get this picture because he was always in action from the day he was born. My neighbors would call me, sitting across the street would say, "Master, do you realize that Ray was up in the tallest part of the pine tree?" I'd say, "No." And I'd look out and he'd be out of the pine tree, but then he'd be out in front of the house on top of the railing, and he never, ever had his feet on the ground. And the way he learned to ride a bicycle, he had 2 older sisters, and he was only about this tall, but he saw those 2 wheels, and so he thought, well, I can do that. And he saw the big verbena bush in the corner, and so he would get his little legs like this over and stand up, of course, because he couldn't fit in it, and just flop into the bush. And he did that once, twice, 20 times until he could stand up riding a bike. Wow. But I mean, that's how much he liked flying around. And yeah, and he had no fear whatsoever. He also had, he had this, he loved the earth. He roller skated from here to San Francisco and back one night. He'd had a drink, I guess, in San Francisco, and he knew better than to drive a car. And he would roller skate. He went to San Jose State for a while and roller skated from the train to his classes. So he was just always on wheels. He also, he was in Chico for a while, and he didn't know it, but his cousin was in Chico. Well, Ray was riding a bicycle down the stairwell, and going up the stairwell was his cousin, Karen, from Grass Valley. And so that's how she knew that Ray was at Chico. And so he survived all that and went on to, he finally found his true love, which was carpentry. And so he worked with his dad then on quite a few houses they did together in Mountain View, and they redid the one on the bank in Redwood City. I mean, at least 30 houses or so. And he went and he was working on a house in Woodside, and it was one morning very early, and he got up to work by himself, finish some part of his project, and he got on the roof of the house. And on the roof was just the cedar wood, and it had gotten wet during the night, and he had his carpenter's belt on him, which is, very heavy. And so that threw him down on his head on the ground. And so he was there alone, and shortly some people came. It was just before they had cell phones, and they helicoptered him to Stanford, and I was blessed to have him for 13 days there. My brother was a doctor at Stanford, and he was, we were up in Tahoe at the time when we got the message that Ray had an accident. And so anyway, Warren watched the operation, and they had to make extra room in the brain for the swelling that takes place. And when I saw Warren, I knew that he had been crying, and that's the second time I ever saw him cry in my life. But he was just a joy, and so he still jumps all around San Mateo. I mean, I just laugh when I see these kids today, because I have them coming across my street. They're on their way to the park, and this kid he jumped up like this to throw his front tire up and have his back tire down, and he was just screeching, and I thought, there goes my Ray, because that's just exactly what he did that so many times. So anyway, I see him a lot, and there's my husband, and I was so grateful. I can't tell you how he came from a pretty large family, and had a lot of loving aunts. He had 4 aunts that adored him. His father died when he was 2.5, and anyway, he worked in the lumber mills up in North San Juan. When he lied, I mean, he was 15 years old when he started working, and he never really stopped working. And so Anyway, he went to Berkeley and engineering, and I was blessed to have the best man in the whole world, and I'll tell you. He had such a great sense of humor. He remembered every joke that he ever heard. And that was a lot of them. And he had to tell them all. So he was just a wonderful person. I was so blessed. So thank you anyway for listening, all of us.
Thank you all for sharing. These are my parents, Anna Marie Espiciosa Mascarenhas, and that is Neves Cirilio Marçal dos Remedios. Yeah, really, seriously. That's why I've got 4 names. I seriously have 4 first names. They met. They were born in the same old village in Goa, India. They knew each other from the age of, she was 6 and he was 9. I think they didn't have a very happy life, both of them. My mother, she was orphaned at the age of 2, and I believe he was orphaned at the age of 3. Yeah. She was raised by her grandmother till the age of 13. And then when the grandmother was done with her, she was sent over to her sisters, who didn't know what to do with her. They beat the hell out of her. It was horrible. It was horrible. That's what she remembers, all her sisters doing to her. My father, him on the other hand, when his mother died at a very young age, he was raised by his siblings too. But interestingly, they lived a life, and she, after World War II, followed my Aunt Mary to Karachi, Pakistan, and he followed her there. And me, my Cynthia and Brian were born in Karachi, Pakistan. And interestingly, they gave us a stellar life growing up. I had nothing but happiness in the household. How they managed to do that, I'd go figure. She was a housewife, and he worked his butt off just providing. He was a provider. She was an ultra-conservative Catholic, right? And a grandmother raised her to be an ultra-conservative Catholic. She'd say the rosary every day, and she said it in English and also in Konkani if the mood moved her. My father and us would just sit there and say the rosary with her. From her, I learned that religion has driven me to spirituality. From him, I learned spirituality. And furthermore, from him, I learned my spirituality allowed me to accept the feminine side of God. And growing up the way I did, we did not even look at any feminine side of God. It was always a male side of God, right? There you go. I always remember them. They knew how to have fun and parties. We went to a lot of parties, family, relatives, and everything. And they'd always be the entertainment of the party, both of them. They loved to sing. And everybody would tell them to sing. And they'd sing in English, Konkani, and Portuguese. And I guess that's why I like to sing. There it is. Growing up, we were never ever told or expressed that they loved us. Interesting. Those were the times. They just showed it. I love you. I don't have to say it to you, I love you. we got hugged a lot. Yeah. And my sister, clearly one day when she became a grandmother, my parents would be hugging them and saying to them, I love you. And Cynthia is my sister. She says to me, did you ever hear them say, I love you when you were growing up? Nope. And there it is. But in reality, they did what they did under the circumstances they were raised. And I'm very proud to have been their oldest son, talking about them here today. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Mom.
This is a picture of my mom and dad. My dad's name was Patrick, one name. My mom's name was Angeline. And my mom had a real traumatic childhood. Her father was an alcoholic, and he was the kind of person that he came from Poland, and he thought that the streets are just paved with gold. So he was always looking for something that he could never find. And so when my mother decided to get married, he was not going to be part of this at all. So he did not want to come to the wedding or anything. So my mom did not have a fancy dress, but she actually, I thought, looked so elegant. And look at this frame. I don't know what they paid for this, but it was like something that was way out of her category because they were very poor. They were quite poor. And they lived across the street from each other. So, and then my mother was real good friends with my father's sister. But my father kept coming back to California. He wanted to live in California. He'd go to Los Angeles, and my mom was waiting for him, I guess, with the anticipation that he was going to pop the question. So he came back after maybe about 6 years. He'd go to California, have adventures, and he was fun-loving, and he was very dramatic. He actually was in some of the movies, and in other words, as extras and stuff. So he comes back and he tells my mother, well, if you don't marry me now, I'm going back to California and you're never going to be see me again. So anyways, I have a feeling that maybe the stories he told, and my mom was really quiet, shy, but the stories he told is maybe why I'm here. Because it was always grandiose, glamorous, and California was things. So anyways, they were lovely people, very different, opposites. So I got to get to know opposites, but I was well loved and very, like I said, my brothers turned out well, I turned out well, and maybe it was all to do with the two of them. So thank you for being my mom and dad.
How many of you have had the distinction of graduating from high school with your mother? My mother, this is all traditional lore from families that I'm going to get to you. Apparently my mother was 4 months pregnant with me when she graduated from high school. So it means that she had to hide it to get through high school, and she had her gown on. So they didn't know that she was pregnant when she graduated. So I graduated with my mother from high school. Now the other lore is, on my father's side of the family, the story is that his mother was 50-some years old when she gave birth to him. That was one story. The other story on their side of the family was that my father was an Indian, and he was born just across the border. He was born to an Indian family, Indian Mexican family, just across the border in Douglas, Arizona. And my father, my grandfather adopted him, or brought him over, adopted him. So for a long time, they, that was the lore, until we did a 23andMe on me. And I'm 83% Western European. So my father is not that. So I just say, it's funny that most of the stories we tell about our parents, we don't know if they're true or not. It's like I was born the day before they were married, supposedly. Well, a year later, supposedly. Well, back in those days, my father and mother, it was easy to change birth certificates back in those days. And my sister was born about a little over a year after I was born. And when it came time for her to start school, they wouldn't let her start school until the next year because she wasn't old enough. So they changed her birth certificate so that she could start a year behind me instead of 2 years behind me. And so we never know, I never knew things that were put down as what we thought were factual were really factual or what, but who cares? That's part of family life. So we all have stories, but you don't have to believe they're real, but they're yours.
Anybody else that was